A bit of background before I begin. I'm a slightly awkward person, but pretty sociable anyway. I've been using dating apps for years to meet new people, and also, I'm extremely oblivious and often don't understand implicit stuff and such. I usually understand things in a literal sense. So, this story began when I matched this girl about a year ago. She wasn't very pretty and her pics weren't great, but like I said, I just wanted to meet fun people. After talking for a while, she asked for my number and called me. She asked me to come over to her place to have some coffee and talk, and I took that literally. Only coffee and talking, so I thought, why not, and left. We met at the tramway station and walked about 10 minutes to her apartment, which smelled funny. A mix of dog and some herbs or something. She soon told me that she had 3 dogs and liked yoga, meditation, massage, which kind of explained it all. As I said, I wasn't expecting anything sexual going down, but then she said something about staying the night and banging all day, and honestly, I just brushed it off at this point. Besides, that night I was throwing a party at my place. It was around 11 a.m. and no, I never told her about my party. Then we drank coffee while talking and, man, it tasted bad. Like, really, really bad. Then she offered a hand massage and I thought, well, she's not asking me to undress and lie face down on a massage bed, so why not? While she was doing it, I was checking her notebooks. There were drawings, and in them was written to the effect of a message in a specific location. For example, you could have something like "prevent cold" written somewhere on the back. She started to massage my ring finger and breathe heavily. I searched the left hand drawing and heavier breathing. I found it, searched for ring finger, and she begins to apply more pressure on the side. Also, even heavier breathing. In fact, this girl is almost having an orgasm, I thought. And then I found it. Written on the side of her left ring finger, in very small caption, was written penis. I thought it was really weird, but just let her finish. And then she said that sometimes people feel dizzy after a hand massage and that I could lie down on her bed if I needed to. And at that moment, I really did start to feel really dizzy. In fact, my vision got blurry. She noticed I wasn't feeling well, but I just went to the bathroom to wash my hands, since she used some nice smelling oil and stuff. Honestly, I couldn't even see my own reflection at this point, let alone text or call someone on my phone. Then, I thought about the horrible coffee and the massage. I pictured myself waking up naked and tied to a bed the next morning, or something even worse. And then her phone rang, and I overheard that some friend was coming over for a few minutes. I almost thought that I was done for, but noticed that she seemed disappointed almost, and I felt relieved at that. I decided I couldn't do anything but just hope for the best at this point, and the friend arrived, and he was actually pretty cool. I want to be a math teacher, and he was a history teacher, and after a few minutes he said that he had to go, and I took my chance. She told me to text her when I got home, and I did, just being polite, I guess. But when I got home, I had one of the worst headaches of my entire life. I waited for it to pass, and that night at the party, I didn't say a word about what happened. I realized that I had done something kind of stupid, and I didn't want to be lectured for it. I never answered her other texts, and I don't even know if she actually did something to the coffee, or if it was just a massage or stress or whatever. But man, did that coffee taste terrible. Either way, I learned a lot from this experience about trusting strangers, and especially about understanding implicit stuff. If she tells you to come over for some coffee, she's definitely not asking you to come over for coffee. I'm not going to lie. I basically went to college to smoke some weed and go to parties. My full intention was to do just enough to get by while partying as much as I could. Unfortunately for me, I only applied to a few schools and was only accepted to one, a small college in the mountains of New Hampshire. It was really small, around 3,500 total undergrads, and I went not knowing anyone. On the first day, as I was skipping the ice-breaking games and other students were giving tours of the campus to their families before leaving, I wandered down a small path behind the cafeteria toward a small stream that I had noticed during the drive-in. I lit a joint and was just meandering around when I noticed another dude a little further down from the stream that cut a straightish path through the trees. He was also smoking a joint, I assumed by the way he was holding it. I made my way over to see if I just made my first college friend and introduced myself. His name was Nate, and he actually seemed pretty cool and was smoking some really nice herbs, so I figured I could get along with him. He stood about 5'5" and was a little stubby, but I remember noticing that he had a really weird laugh, like a nervous type, and that whenever he laughed, he'd kind of look off to the side and glance back at me from his peripheral vision. And yes, I knew it was weird even back then, from the first time that I met him, literally the first 30 seconds of introducing myself, but I just thought that maybe he was socially awkward or something, had bad teeth, who knows. I was taught not to judge, and he was otherwise normal. We ended up hanging out fairly frequently though, playing video games, drinking, smoking, but other people, especially in my dorm, didn't really seem to take to him. Not that I really felt a strong bond with him or anything, because I didn't. It was a superficial friendship, built around drugs and debauchery, but I definitely got the sense that my other friends weren't comfortable around him. But then, something weird happened that I've managed to successfully forget about until pretty recently. One weekend, my roommate was home for a visit, and Nate's roommate was having his girlfriend over, which basically implied in college terms that Nate was staying with me. It seemed pretty automatic, and we got trashed and smoked a ton, got pizza and just played video games. I was pretty out of it, and we were both sitting in desk chairs in my room, passing a bowl back and forth when he handed the bowl to me. Leaning toward me in his chair, he put his hand over my hand and casually, in a low and steady voice, said, "I'm going to fucking kill you." Okay, so, like I said, we were all sorts of fucked up by that point, but I was definitely freaked out a little. He'd never really been aggressive before, even when he was this intoxicated, and certainly never said anything like this before. I've never handled confrontation very well, so all I said was, "No dude, don't do that bro," and sort of laughed it off and tried to write it off as a drunk, stoned idiot playing too much Mortal Kombat or something. We had a bunk bed set up in my room since it was pretty small, and I was on the top. My roommate was a bigger guy and didn't want to have to climb down to pee in the middle of the night, so we just agreed upon it. We had both gone to bed, but my roommate had put up Christmas lights that we just always kept on, strung along the ceiling. I should also add that I'm half deaf, so when I sleep, I tend to roll into my functioning ear to block out sounds or muffle them into the pillow. This also means that I'm a pretty heavy sleeper. Anyway, sometime during the night, I just randomly woke up, feeling a little nauseous, and slowly opened my eyes. And Nate was just standing on the edge of his mattress, holding onto the side railings of my top bunk and staring directly at my face as I was sleeping. What the fuck? My eyes got wide as I snapped awake and sat up. "Whoa, what the fuck, dude?" I said, backing up and bumping my head on the wall behind me. Then he turned his head and gave me that weird look from the corner of his eyes, the same smile and laugh that freaked me out the first day I met him. He was still holding the railings, standing on the mattress from the lower bunk. His face was lit in weird splashes of colour from the Christmas lights, he took one hand from the railing and put his finger over his mouth, while smiling and still looking at me sideways, and whispered, "Shh," before hopping down and just leaving the room. It was like 3 a.m. and honestly, I don't know where he went that night. I never told anyone about that and pretty much did my best to bury it and never think about it again. I also avoided Nate for the rest of the year, making up excuses when he wanted to chill alone, but did end up at some parties with him a few times. But we never talked about that and he never brought it up. I transferred to another school the following year, not because of Nate or anything, but just financial reasons, and did manage to forget about that weird incident. And that was about 15 years ago. I'm 33 now and recently got a call from an old roommate from the school in New Hampshire, who luckily remembered my very repetitive phone number. I made a song out of it that's really easy to remember and have never changed the number. "Yeah, so, man, do you remember that guy Nate who you used to hang out with at the dorms? Well, I just found out that he killed 2 of his friends with a hunting knife and fishing line on a camping trip a year ago. He said that he was too fucked up to control himself, and he was mixing his meds with booze and drugs, and apparently they said that he just lost it." The thing that just gets to me is wondering if he told them that he was going to kill them, and if the last thing that they saw was that sideways smile that I saw when I woke up that night. Whatever the case, I'm pretty sure that I escaped a close call that night. I'm a 17-year-old high school girl with a weak body. I live in a small town in the Philippines, and this town is surrounded by rice fields with a highway going straight across it. I hope you get what I'm saying. A part of my usual weekend routine is to go jogging early in the morning, sometime around 5 a.m. And my usual jogging route is from my house, somewhere in the middle of town, to a small hill with a wonderful view of the town in the morning. To reach my destination, I would have to jog on the side of the highway sometimes. From time to time, a fog that lasts an hour would appear in the highway, and once you're inside, you could only see 10 or 15 feet before it just all goes white. So one Saturday, I decided to jog. I invited one of my friends, same age, to join me since he follows the same route anyway. We left home at 5 a.m. and proceeded to the highway. As usual, a thick fog blanketed the highway. The cars that would pass by had their lights on, and there were several one-ways because of the road repairs. My country is currently issuing a nationwide widening of the national roads. As we entered the fog, we decided to jog along the side of the road and past a couple of roadworks, about 100 meters long each. All was well at that point. We were a bit exhausted, but otherwise we were fine. We barely encountered anybody else, which was odd because usually there would be just a few fellow joggers too. That hill, the view, is pretty famous here. Then we came across another roadwork. It wasn't that far from the hill, and we saw this guy crouched down on the asphalt. He was wearing a dirty orange vest and similar dirty hard hat. We couldn't see his face, but we just decided to ignore it. He looked as if he was fidgeting with something in his hands, so we thought that he was just holding a few tools or something. Also, there was nobody there but us, me, my friend, and that guy. The fog was still thick as heck too. My friend signaled me to keep a distance from the guy, and I followed him. When we got closer, we heard him humming a strange tune under his breath, which in itself wasn't that weird. But boy, were we wrong about this guy. As we got closer and closer to the guy, he started acting erratically. He stopped for a moment as I passed him, and then he just started laughing. It wasn't a regular laugh too. It sounded sinister and a little dry. It was really loud too, so it really freaked us out. We didn't increase our speed at that point though, as we thought that maybe he was just toying with us. But he didn't stop. He just kept laughing and laughing, and we knew at this point that it was beyond a prank. I can't describe his laugh more than I just did, but trust me, he wasn't faking it. We didn't look back, and we were speeding up now as we were starting to see the hill. I was gasping for air, but I didn't know what would happen if I stopped, so I just forced myself to keep running, and my friend did the same. He was probably about 50 meters behind us when I decided to look at him. He had stopped laughing at this point, but now he was standing up straight and was glaring at us. He called out to us in my language in an enraged tone, and that's when the adrenaline kicked in. I just ran and ran until we finally reached the hill. In hindsight, I don't know how I was able to even push myself that far for so long. When we finally arrived at the top of the hill, we were totally exhausted. In fact, I nearly collapsed on a cement bench and stayed there for another hour. Like a breath of fresh air, my friend laughed in a more comedic manner, and I followed suit. We laughed the whole thing off, waiting for the fog to lift. And when it did, we walked home. I hadn't had breakfast yet, so I was pretty hungry at this point. As we passed the roadwork we saw the guy in, he was obviously no longer there. The only people there wearing construction outfits were the ones signaling the traffic, but none looked like the man that we saw. As I got home, I told my parents about what had happened, and they said it was probably just another nut job, which were common in my town, that stole a construction outfit or something. But since then, I've never really gone jogging in the fog again. But what really seems kind of sinister about this whole situation is the fact that this guy was wearing that worker suit. I mean, if you were just trying to scare someone or get at someone to have a bit of a laugh, why dress up like that? And again, why crouch down and act like you're doing some work or something? I don't know. The whole situation was really sketchy. And boy, am I glad that I brought my friend along for the run that day. It's 2012, and at the time, I was 15 years old, a white guy, and was 5'11" then. I grew up living in a rougher part of Minneapolis area. Now, this plays a huge role in my story because of something called being street smart. Growing up, you make mental notes of people to determine what their business is. If someone throws gang symbols, you stay the hell away. If you see the police, you turn the other way, and if someone starts running, you know it's for a reason. Naturally, you learn who and what to stay away from. My parents worked hard, and they did the best that they could to make the best of our situation. Wanting to make memories for us, they actually bought us a cabin. I won't say where this cabin is for privacy's sake, but it's pretty far up north. There was actually a lot to do up there. Fishing and swimming filled up most of the days. At the time, the only thing that I could afford was an iPod, and I took pictures with it, and we hung out with other kids. This year was actually looking really good for my family. My mum had gotten a raise, and we bought 2 used ATVs. 4-wheeler trailers are everywhere up there, and we spent half the summer exploring them. So, it was the beginning of August when my friend and I went out onto the trails to reach another lake. It was around 70 out and it was foggy, but still a decent day. Around a mile out from the lake, there's this road that cuts across the trail and a little parking area with a map, along with a bridge around the corner close by. If you don't know what geocaching is, it's basically a worldwide treasure hunting game. I had no interest in it, but my friend was absolutely obsessed. We get off the ATVs and he tells me, "Hey man, I'm gonna go look for a geocache because apparently there's one nearby. It'll be quick, don't worry." While he was looking, I walked down the hill and around the corner to the bridge. The bridge is in this valley area with tall grass on both sides. The dirt road dipped and ran right through it, and in the middle was the bridge that connected both sides. It was very quiet because no one was around and we had only seen one other person the whole time. I was taking pictures, just dangling my legs off the edge, when I hear the sound of a car in the distance. As the sound grew louder, it broke the silence. On the opposite side of the valley, a small Ford Contour appeared and stopped at the top of the hill. I froze for a second, thinking that it was a little bit odd. At the time, I was thinking he must have seen me dangling off the edge and thought that I was going to jump or something. I grabbed my iPod and just got up and started jogging. I started walking back to the ATVs when I heard the car's motor rev. I looked back and saw him moving fast down the hill. Not wanting to look worried, but wanting to get away, I started jogging. He was approaching fast, and I knew that if I ran, I wouldn't make it to the lot before he caught up. He slowed and pulled up right next to me while I was jogging. And the next thing that I did was the dumbest thing that I could have done. I slowed to a walk as he rolled down the window. He was old, around 60s and greasy looking. The front of his car was full of junk and smelled terribly like cigarettes. He then said, "Hey, you should get in my car." Obviously, I told him, Nah, I'm good, man." Trying my best to make it obvious that it was uncomfortable, he gave me this really creepy smile. He then said in a kind of crackled voice, "I don't think you have an option, kid." As he said this, I saw the glove box open, and immediately I knew what was coming next and prepared to book it. It popped open and a gun came into full view. I ran the fastest that I've ever run before, but the bend was only 50 feet away when I hear his car click into gear. His car was old and gave me enough time to round the corner before I heard the car speed up the road. I ran up the driveway of the lot and yelled at my friend to start the four-wheelers. The car pulled into the parking lot as I said this, and they started up and we drove off, leaving our helmets behind. But the car followed us out and onto the road. He followed us from a distance, and I knew that there was a trail opening within a half mile. I was scared because I knew within the next minute that we would have to slow down to make our turn, giving the car time to catch up. We slowed and turned onto a path too steep for a car without four-wheel drive. I went after my friend and looked back at the car passing by. As I looked at him one last time, I saw another man. He must have been laying down across the back seats out of sight, and they both glared at me and just sped off. After 3 miles, we stopped on the side and just caught our breath. We couldn't even speak because we were so shook. We sat there for a good 15 minutes with the motors off to listen for the sound of the car. We got back up and the first thing my friend says is, "Oh, shit. We forgot the helmets, dude." The trail hooked back around to our original path, so we made our way back and the car was long gone by this point. We grabbed our helmets and we just got the hell out of there. I hope that anyone listening to this will never have to go through this like I have. But here's some advice for listeners. Please, always be aware of your surroundings. I'm now 21 and I also carry a gun wherever I go. And if something doesn't seem right, stop and look around. It may actually save your life one day. We all have that one ex that just grinds our gears, but mine is fairly more creepy than the average drunk texting arsehole. About 3 years ago, I was in a long-distance relationship with a younger man, meaning that he was only 17 at the time while I turned 19 in the relationship. His name is Peter. Peter was not a nice person, to say the least. He thought that the first impressions he made on people were the only one that he needed, and as such, he stopped being nice and polite or reasonable to people after the first meeting. I was young and saw past this, thinking that I could somehow change him. However, his abuse towards people around me and myself eventually became too much and I broke off the relationship with him. The breakup went smoothly, all things considered. Except he wanted me to say the words so he could play the victim. This had been a core element of our fighting because he hinted that he wanted the breakup, but instead of just saying it, he kept me on the hook and became even more abusive. But I'm getting sidetracked now. The point is that I thought of the matter as resolved and entered a loving relationship with my current boyfriend shortly after this. Then came the day where Peter wanted to come and get his belongings back. I texted him a list of everything that he had left in my apartment, and he okayed that it was everything. We also made an appointment for him to stop by my apartment around 3 p.m. the following Thursday. I have no intentions of letting him back in my home, nor being alone with him, since he suddenly seems to have many mood swings after seeing me in another relationship. He's been blocked from my Facebook account, but somehow knew that I was in a new relationship, which was a major red flag to me and my boyfriend. So, the Thursday came and I felt eager to just be done with this whole thing. My boyfriend and I are walking home from high school when my phone rings. It's Peter. He yells at me that he's now been waiting at the train station for over an hour. I try to reason with him and agree to meet him there with his belongings since he needs to catch a train. My boyfriend walks with me to the train station, but we arrive only to find it vacant. I live in a small town and the train station is mostly used during rush hours in the morning and evening. It's also located, rather bizarrely, among normal residences, and there are a lot of alleyways leading all over town from there. I get a text stating that Peter can see us, but won't come out of hiding when my boyfriend is there. We leave his stuff on a bench at the train station, calmly replying that I'm not actually interested in meeting with him again. When I say calmly, I mean that my reply is calm. Me, on the other hand, I'm shaking and my boyfriend is furious over this child play. On our way home, though, I receive another text. This time he states that he had a gift for me and it's in my mailbox. This freaks us out even more, mostly because this indicates that he might be waiting at my home. It's entirely possible that he watched us at the train station and then ran all the way to my apartment. However, there's no trace of him and nothing except a bill in my mailbox. By now, we figured that he was just acting up out of spite and proceeded to ignore the bombardment of texts, calls, and so forth that followed that day. After a while, life returns to normal. But then, I get another call, this time from my ex's older brother, who's worried about his sibling. Apparently, he has disappeared, taking one of his brother's gas pistols. Obviously, I'm speechless at this, but since I haven't seen anything, I shake it off as just another childish act. That same day, my boyfriend sees police officers walking around the basement staircase on the exterior of the house we lived in, while doing some grocery shopping. He did this every day around 4 p.m, and the next day, we are contacted by my boyfriend's mother. In the newspaper, there's a description of an unnamed young man from the same town as Peter, who's been arrested for attempted robbery of the pizza place that I lived above. He was apparently armed with a knife, a gas pistol, and lighter fluid, while stating that he was not attempting a robbery but was there to visit his ex, presumably me. Contacting the police, I discovered that he also had a mask, fake papers, and a wig in a duffel bag, which he had thrown down into the staircase when, around 4 p.m, he had jumped a fence and tried to enter the pizza place. This means that my boyfriend went out of our front door while my ex was hiding right beside the front door, armed. Honestly, I have never been that freaked out before. The sad truth is that my ex never got charged with anything too, because he was a minor, has a father with a military background and a lot of money. I write this now because, after 3 years, I thought that this horror story was finally a closed chapter. That was, until I received a declaration of love from a fake email account, signed Peter. I received this just 2 weeks ago. This happened earlier last year, and it still fucks me up if I think about it too much. First, a little backstory to explain. I'm a delivery driver for UberEATS and have been doing it as a side gig for the past year or so to earn some extra cash. Also, I'm a girl. Yeah, so UberEATS it's a super chill job, although the pay is definitely not ideal, especially at night. Normally, any pings I get after 10 PM are just shitty fast food orders to customers where the chances of being tipped are even lower than what they already are. Which is low, I tell ya. I would say 2 in 10 people tip on the UberEATS, but whatever. Anyways, late night deliveries are rarely profitable, which is why I would barely do them. However, on this night last year, there was a bonus going on. Reach 15 deliveries in a certain time frame to get an extra $75. That was music to my ears. So when that's the case, late night deliveries, they rock because there's no traffic and it doesn't matter where you're picking up from. The faster you get them done too, the faster you get to go home and knock out. Open roads all the way, it works for me. I was on a roll and finished my last Mickey D's run at 2:30 in the morning. Cashed my bonus and just called it a night. For context, this took place in downtown San Diego. Downtown San Diego has fun restaurants, clubs at the core, but as you branch out, it gets a bit more seedy. Once you get past 16th Street, it gets really sketchy. Lots of homeless camps, the works. I actively try to avoid that area, but in order to get back home and on the freeway, I had to pass through that neighborhood. Oh, and one more piece of info. I drive a 2002 shitty Ford Focus, and nothing's automatic. In order to roll the windows up or down, you have to reach over and crank the lever. Because it's a hassle to roll them up and down manually each time, when I do deliveries, usually I just keep both my windows rolled down because it's easier to pick up and deliver through the windows that way. But this night, fuck me, I had my windows down as usual. I was planning to roll them up before I passed 16th Street where the homeless camp was, but didn't get that far. As I turned down a side street, heading towards the main drag, up ahead, I see a man in one of those orange reflective construction vests standing on the side of the road. There's always some sort of construction going on downtown, and it's pretty common for it to happen at night, so I didn't really pay much attention to it. As I get closer though, the man runs into the middle of the street, waving his arm, signaling to stop. I start to slow down, thinking that he's going to direct traffic or reroute me or something. I brake to 10 miles per hour and then 5, leaving distance trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. He breaks out into a jog towards my car and stops directly in front of it, blocking me and my car from moving forward. Immediately, I felt uneasy about this. This is weird. I'm wishing my windows were rolled up at this point, because it's 3 AM on a dark street and there's not a soul around except me and this dude. People talk about fight or flight, and I've always wondered how I would react in a situation that warranted a similar response. And now I know. My reaction is to fucking freeze. Because as I was slowing down, it hit me 5 seconds later than it should have. This guy is not a construction worker. He does have a hard hat on and a vest, and also the creepiest smile that I've ever seen in my life. At first, I thought he was just smiling to be friendly, but smiling to acknowledge someone longer than a few seconds is super unnerving. I mean, you can try it right now. Count to 5 in your head while grinning and you'll see what I mean. That's what this guy was doing. Now that he's in front of me, I can tell that he's homeless. That or just I don't know. He was an older guy. I would guess 60s, but homeless has a way of making everyone look older, so who knows really. And he was just staring at me, wild-eyed and smiling, all teeth. And honestly, his smile and mannerisms, the best way I can describe it, it's Twisty from American Horror Story. Google him if you want to. Literally though, this guy looked insane. I obviously should have just reversed, but my brain was panicking and I didn't think that fast. I'm frozen in my car thinking that this is how I'm going to die. And this whole time, he didn't say a word. He just leered there. And then, like a ninja, he jumps onto the hood of my car and slams his fists against my hood. I am frozen in terror just watching this guy. And he starts pounding on the hood of my car and crawling around on his hands and knees, not saying anything, just crawling and staring at me. And that was the most terrifying part. He never broke eye contact once during all of this, and he never stopped grinning. The thought of my windows being open made me want to throw up, but at the same time, breaking eye contact and moving to roll them up, it felt scarier. Like if I made any sudden moves or looked away, he would try to come inside the car or something. He never said a word, too. In fact, I think it would have been less scary if he actually said something, but he didn't. Just pounded his fists on the car and stared at me. In all reality, this whole encounter probably lasted all of 15 seconds, but man, did it drag on. I'm freaking out, and before I can gain sense to do anything remotely intelligent, I see headlights in my rearview mirror coming up behind me from down the street. This man sees them too, and in an instant, he jumps off my car and breaks off into a run, behind me and towards the new car. I floor it and don't look back until I'm halfway home on the freeway, and at this point, it's all adrenaline. For a long time after that, I stopped delivering at night. I mean, I sure as hell don't go to that section of downtown anymore too. I take the longer route home. And I don't drive with the windows down at night if it's in an area even remotely run down. What I realize from this whole thing though is how naive I can be just to automatically trust and obey someone just because they have a uniform. Like, I didn't even question slowing down at first, even though the situation was sketchy as fuck. The opposite, actually. In my mind, I was comforted by the fact that somebody trustworthy was on the road. The subconscious thoughts went like, oh nice, a public servant doesn't want me to make a wrong turn. But by the time I stopped, it would have been already too late if this guy wanted to attack me. And I shudder thinking about it. I calmed down eventually by reassuring myself that this was probably just a crazy dude on drugs who really just meant no harm. Which, hopefully, that's the case. And for my own peace of mind too, I'm going to believe that it is. But what got to me is the fact that this guy was dressed as a road worker, on the road, and deliberately behaving at first in a way that led me to believe that he was one. I mean, why else wear that getup, and why are you trying to pull cars over? Just to freak people out? I don't know the answer to it, and I'm glad that I didn't find out what it was that he wanted from me. Fucking yikes. So, yeah, I'm just really glad that I didn't get out of the car or something. And in fact, thinking back on it, maybe that's what he really wanted. This is a long one, but was so bizarre that I think it's worth telling. I wanted to post it because this person recently tried to friend my husband on Facebook, and it brought back some crazy memories that I need to vent out. So, I got married right at 18. I was a pretty book-smart kid, but lacked a lot of street smarts. By the time I turned 20, my now ex-husband and I had moved into a rental property in a pretty nice suburb outside Chicago. In the basement of the house was a big mother-in-law suite where a good male friend of ours, Nick, lived as well. I was about halfway through nursing school at this time, and this particular semester of nursing school, I had a very early clinical rotation once a week. I was also 21 at the time. I'm not a morning person, so in order to maximize the amount of time I spent asleep, I started loading all my stuff into my car the night before. Bags, books, and even my purse. Again, street smart's lacking, I know. One particular night before clinicals, I asked my ex-husband Bobby to get a book from my car. Bob does, but forgets to lock the door. The next morning when I get to my car, I note that my purse is gone. I ended up filing a police report. I was really concerned because, well, I had just gotten this new job as nurse's aide at a hospital and I had my social security card still sitting in my wallet. And that was strike 3 for street smarts. Almost immediately after the theft, strange things started to happen. We started getting ding-dong ditches all hours of the day and night. Someone vandalized mine, Nick's and Bob's car with strange graffiti. They egged our house and slashed Nick's tires. We first chalked it up to neighborhood pranksters, but when we started having damages that cost some decent money, we called the police. Not to mention that one day when Bob was mowing the lawn too, he noticed piles of cigarette butts just outside of the bedroom window. The police came out and pretty much did nothing but take a report, and told us to perhaps invest in car alarms and some brighter floodlights for the driveway. A few weeks after this, at 2:30 in the morning, I get a call on my cell phone. It was the police in a neighbouring town. They had picked up someone who had my ID on them, someone named Craig J. When they asked why he had someone else's ID on him, he claimed that I was his girlfriend. The cop called me because my name had popped that I'd filed a police report for theft. I assured the cops that I'd never heard of him before and was told that I could pick up my ID at the police station within the next few days. And things really started to escalate at this point, but I still didn't make the connection that perhaps these incidences were related. I started getting strange messages on MySpace. This was in 2009. As well as on Facebook from clearly fake accounts, with long-winded messages that just made no sense whatsoever. This person also started messaging friends of mine as well. I deleted MySpace and blocked the person on Facebook, but new accounts just kept being created. Somehow, this person got my email address and started sending emails as well. I had no idea who this person could be, but they seemed to know details about me that indicated that this was either someone I knew or knew someone I knew. The messages, they weren't overtly threatening, but they were certainly creepy enough to where I started to become uncomfortable. One night, my friend Lauren and I were sitting on the couch watching TV. Bob, Lauren's husband, and a few other friends had gone out for the night. As we're sitting around chilling, we hear something that sounds like someone shaking the garage door. It was an attached garage. I go and check the garage, and nothing seems out of the ordinary. We did have occasional issues with raccoons, so I chalked it up to that. But the noise keeps continuing. Lauren and I are getting pretty freaked out at this point. Now, understanding the layout of the house, it was a modern-style ranch house with no upstairs. The garage sounds moved down to the kitchen window, a distinct sound of someone knocking or scratching hard on the windows. We call their husbands, who they didn't answer. And at this point, we debate calling the police. But what if it's only an animal or tree branches? We don't want to seem stupid. As we sit there debating, I see Lauren's face go sheet white and look past me. I spin around and I can see that the locked, fortunately, handle to the front door was wiggling. We were seated in the kitchen, and we jump up. Lauren grabs a knife from the butcher block on the counter, and I grab a small hammer from the junk drawer. We book it to the back of the house where the bedrooms are, cell phone in hand, and lock ourselves in one of the bedrooms and call the police. The dispatcher tells us to stay on the line, move furniture in front of the door if possible, and the police are on their way. We shove a dresser in front of the door, knife and hammer in hand, and we agreed that if this fucker was going to come in, he might be bigger or stronger than us, but he was not going to take us down without a fight. We plan if he gets in before the cops do, and I go for the head with the hammer and she goes for the gut with the knife. The cops showed up though, thankfully, banging on the front door, shouting police. We can see the red and blue lights through the window, and we leave the room and let the cops in. And they find no signs of anyone present or evidence of an attempted break-in. They take a report, and in the meanwhile, my husbands finally call us back, and they come home and the cops leave. Flash forward a few months from there, and a close friend of ours, Sean, was renovating his apartment and needed a place to crash along with his girlfriend. Bob and I decided that he could stay in the third bedroom in our house. The first night Sean stays with us, we're awakened at 2 a.m. by Sean screaming at someone. Bob and I jump out of bed and rush into the hall and to Sean's room. Sean and his girl are wide awake, lights on, looking totally freaked out. And the screen is sliced and flopping in the wind. Sean told us that he woke up to someone using what he thought was a knife on the screen and started climbing in through the window. We call the cops again and they come out and take another statement. Sean describes the guy as best as he could. A white male, young-looking, semi-shaved head with what looked like darker hair. The cops dust for fingerprints and it comes back as a match for Craig J. Turns out, I knew who he was, vaguely. He was a year younger than me and we had gone to the same high school, but I couldn't remember having any significant interactions with him. He lived with his parents only a few blocks from my parents' house, and I ended up reaching out to high school acquaintances who knew him, and they remembered him as a nice but odd kid, kind of quiet but definitely on the strange side, who had dropped out of school before graduation. Upon realizing that Sean had just moved in, the cops make a statement that chilled all of us to the bone. Yeah, he probably didn't realize anyone was staying in this bedroom and thought that the room would be empty. The cops eventually go to where he is and arrest him, and he suddenly has quite the story for them. Him and I were apparently secret lovers, and I was ignoring him. We had a relationship, and he also had been allowed into my home many times. Obviously, I'm flawed at this. He gets charged with something like trespassing or breaking and entering and does light time for it, maybe a month, and has to pay a fine. In the meanwhile, I get a restraining order on him and he gets out and I hear nothing from him. And I also develop a completely irrational fear of first floor windows. Around Christmas of 2010, I'm now 23. I figure the whole Craig thing is in the past, and Bob and I decided to divorce. It was totally unrelated to this, and we went our separate ways, and Nick has long since moved out too. We end the lease, and I moved to a less desirable suburb with the affordable rent and all. I settle on an apartment in a 4-unit building that had a locked entrance, and the only way in was with a key or with someone opening the door from the inside. I lived on the 2nd floor, and by this time, I had graduated and was now a nurse and was working now at a nursing home. But spring and summer of 2011, and it starts up again, with calls coming through to me at work, only to have someone hang up on them. Letters also suddenly appeared in the staff-only mailbox, mailed to me with no return address. The strange emails started up again from random accounts. The messages were never overtly threatening, but boy were they long, and way too frequent. Way too out of there, if you ask me. He spoke to me as if we were long-lost friends or something, and had some sort of connection. I don't think he ever threatened to hurt me, but the cutting into the house with a knife? I don't know what the heck was going through this guy's head. What I did kind of seem to piece together over the years from all his ramblings is that he had some sort of crush on me when I was younger. Although I never remember even speaking to him during high school. and him happening to rob my car was some sort of sign from the universe or something that we were meant to be together. I called the cops, and they basically tell me that because there have been no threats, and other than an OOP or a cease and desist, there's not much that they can do except watch and wait. This goes on for a while, and finally, one night, I wake up at 2 a.m. to the doorbell ringing, and I am instantly in a panic. I look out the window, and there, illuminated in the floodlight, is Craig. I burst out crying. In my half-awake state, I run across the hall and start banging on my neighbour's door. He was an older divorced guy who lived alone, and he goes downstairs, confronts Craig, and tells him the cops have been called. And I actually called the cops, and he takes off. I file a report, and they claim that they'll go and talk to him, but this only makes things worse. Friends I have on Facebook now start getting random messages from Craig, asking about me, telling them that he has important information for me. Other times he alternates, saying that I owe him money and I have a debt that I need to pay off. My friends obviously block him as he goes along them. Meanwhile, my younger sister is living in the city with a few friends. He somehow finds out where and drives to her apartment and confronts her while she has people over. She freaks out and they kick him out, and she calls the cops, who basically again state that he didn't technically commit a crime but offer her a restraining order. And right after this, another incident. My younger cousin is a high school senior on the cross-country team, and he shows up at my cousin's practice. Obviously, my cousin has no clue who he is, but he starts demanding information on me, and the coach gets involved. And Craig gets into a fight with the coach. The cops are called, and he's banned from the school grounds, but nothing more. He calls the nursing home administrator at my job, asking him to talk to me and that he has important information to tell me. The administrator, my work was now aware of the situation, tells him not to come onto the property or he'll have him arrested for trespassing. At this point, I'm obviously paranoid beyond measure. And then, just as quickly as it started, it faded off. It's now summer of 2012, and the final capper in this saga. I'm almost 25 now, and a friend of mine named Stacy, and incidentally Sean's ex, moved in with me temporarily while she looked for a place. She was dating a new guy and spent quite a few nights at his place. And one day, I picked up a double shift, starting at 7 a.m. and ending at 11:30 p.m. Stacy texts me around 3:30 p.m. stating that she won't be home that night and was going out with her guy. I arrive home at almost midnight. When I get home, the first thing that I notice is that the door is unlocked. Uneasy, but thinking perhaps Stacy had just forgotten to lock it, I cautiously peer inside. I pan my gaze to the kitchen and living room, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm unsettled. Something just wasn't sitting right. Due to all of these incidences, I always made sure that 1 or 2 lights were on, even when we weren't home. I was still not even fully in the door when I noticed that I was staring into a pitch-black apartment, and immediately my brain went into full panic, and I am sure glad that it did. Stacy could have forgotten to leave a light on, but my instincts were in overdrive and sounding off every alarm. My Puerto Rican neighbor, who lived in one of the building units, was known for his weekend parties, and I could hear a party going on downstairs. I book it downstairs and bust into the party and tell him what had happened. He looks at me like I'm crazy, but agrees to come upstairs with me. We get inside and he looks around and we don't see anyone. And at this point, I'm starting to wonder if I'm just nuts or something. Maybe Stacy and her boyfriend had, after all, just left in a hurry, forgetting to turn on the low lights and lock the door. He agrees with me and sort of jokingly pulls open the pantry door. And what I saw next will never, ever leave my mind. There, crouched inside, is Craig. To cut a long story short, the Puerto Rican neighbor puts the guy in a chokehold and I call the police. To this day, I have no idea what he was planning on doing. The cops come out and he was arrested. Because my neighbor was having a party, he had the door open to the alleyway. And chances are, he just walked right into the building. And even if anyone noticed, people would have just assumed that he was there for the party or whatever. It's more confusing how he got into the apartment itself, though. My theory is that my roommate at the time was from the country, and while I lived in a suburb, it was the type of suburb right on the edge of a major US city, so we always locked our doors and generally kept everything secured as a rule. She was used to leaving her doors unlocked and wide open, being from the country and all, and I think honestly, it may have just slipped her mind when she went out of the door for the night. I confronted her about it, and she of course denied it, but that's really the only logical way that he could have gotten in. I mean, I always locked both the knob lock and the deadbolt whenever I left the house, so unless he was a skilled locksmith or something, I have no idea how he could have gotten in. But after this, I didn't stay alone or go anywhere by myself for a long time. I feel that I actually developed a type of paranoia because of all of this, and was highly suspicious of giving my number or any information out to anyone. He ended up being charged and convicted of aggravated stalking, breaking and entering, and some other charges that I can't remember. I did meet his parents in court, who were both, shockingly, very normal, apologetic people. They tried explaining that their son, he was mentally ill and suffered from bipolar disorder. After he served time, I didn't hear from him for years. That is, until 2016, when he found me on Facebook again. I was much older now, around 29, and I replied to him very firmly that any contact would end in the police being called, and that I had no interest in him at all. I blocked him in any way that I could, and recently, he found my new husband on Facebook and friended him. He blocked him as well, obviously. To this day, I still have paranoia. I had parked my car near a baseball diamond once, and some kids most likely hit a baseball into my windshield and took off. And I guessed this because I had a perfectly baseball-sized spider crack on the glass. But despite it being completely logical that it most likely was a baseball, I instantly reverted to, oh shit, is he back? I have no idea what happened to him, and I also am now a total psycho about keeping things locked. Twice, my life got screwed up because doors weren't locked. My car door and most likely my apartment door. I do have an acquaintance monitoring him on Facebook. His page is not private, and from what I've seen, he appears to go through periods where he's pretty inactive and then episodes where he's rambling, overposting, oversharing and acting generally deranged. In the end, I believe his parents were telling the truth when they stated that he was medicated. He's okay, and part of me feels bad for him in a way. I'm older now, and I've been a nurse for almost 10 years, and some of which time was spent in a psych specialty. The mind is a strange thing. Looking back though, those were some of the worst years of my adult life. He put me through a lot of anxiety and caused a lot of issues for me. I slept with my couch pushed against my apartment door for the next 2 years before I moved out of there, in fact. I'm now married, but on nights where I'm home alone, I still find myself resisting the urge to stack furniture in front of the doors. Oh, and one of the other fallouts from this situation is that Craig either sold or lost or gave away my social security card that had been in my purse. Someone tried to file for Medicare benefits in Arizona using my name and social, and as well as obtained a job using my social and failed to pay any taxes. leaving me with a surprise asset freeze by the IRS and a whole financial mess that needed to be untangled before they unfroze my accounts and paid me back the money they started to pull out of my paychecks for the back taxes that I had nothing to do with. And my credit got extremely messed up for years because of it too. And to this day, I have a lock on my social security number and monitor my accounts like a hawk. Anyway, I guess the moral of this story is never leave your purse in a car, and always lock your doors.